I am the Dreaming Turtle. I will be your guide. And this little dude over here, your co-host, waiting on some treats. Would you like some treats, little dude? Would you like some treats, little dude? I got you. Say meow. Enjoy, little dude. Enjoy. Happy treating. And this is what we're smoking on today. I've already got us a little rappy rap all rolled up. Beamer and all. So let's get it lit up, baby. Let's get it lit up. Nice. So we've talked about it in previous videos, but in live streams, I was in an accident. So today we're going to talk in greater detail about it. And 5 years old, I was running out of the basement of our house. And my brother was coming around the other corner, or the corner, out of the basement door on his bicycle. And we met in the middle, both of us going full speed. The handlebars caught me right in the head. And I already had some mental-ish problems and some definite health problems before that. But this video is going to be more specific to the brain injury. So, yeah, I don't remember the accident very well. I remember Mike and the bike coming at me, and everything after that is just kind of blur. The picture in the corner up there, and also, just so you can see it in full right there, that was me after the accident. By the way, it was one of my mama's favorite pictures of me. Of course, I've got it superimposed over the medicine wheel there, but you get the point. So Mom was, always kind of tight-lipped around the accident. Well, not really tight-lipped. It was just that it was, I don't think she really wanted to talk about it. She said that, she didn't remember if I lost consciousness or not, that I just kind of fell backwards and was caught. But I don't know. I had a broken arm, and you could see in the picture, half of my face was like black and blue, and this was around 1983, and obviously we didn't know the things that we know now, but it was just kind of passed off, and something that I talk about me having other problems. One of the things that nobody ever connected the dots until, I guess, me really recently was I had this thing where outside of my recurrent pneumonias and all of that stuff, I would randomly throw up places that we went. I threw up in the middle of Montgomery Ward's store looking at the TV displays. I'd throw up at the 4th of July celebrations at Gypsy Hill Park, back when the Statler Brothers used to play every year. We went to Morrison's Cafe in Charlottesville here in Virginia, and I threw up in the middle of Morrison's Cafe. And that was a regular occurrence for, I'm going to say, probably about 3 years, directly after the accident. And, like I said, nobody ever really made the connection, and it was just kind of a mystery, until I realized, actually fairly recently, like within the past couple months, like, holy shit, that was post-concussion syndrome. So, obviously, I'm 5 years old. My brain is still developing. And so, my brain injury is, in effect, a, a developmental disability because my brain was developing under duress. I didn't understand that. The people in my family, we didn't understand that. Even doctors that I saw for years and years and years after that, I was never officially diagnosed, or whatever you want to call it, as a developmental disability or brain injury type of thing. There was a mistaken diagnosis of autism, but I wasn't born autistic. I was born shy, and I was born a mommy's boy, but I wasn't really born autistic. I think that those symptoms came from directly from the brain injury. But we'll get into some of that because when I started going to school, that's when the problems really started showing up because I didn't interact with the other kids. I wasn't the best at interacting with the other kids. I remember being in, was sitting at a table playing with toy cars and by myself and having the teachers call my mom and say, hey, he's not socializing with the other children, he's doing this, he's not interacting. And they tried and tried and tried, but I wanted to sit in the corner and play with the cars. I didn't know these other kids. I didn't want to have to take the time to get to know the other kids, right or wrong, whatever it was. But yeah, I had a lot of social problems, and in the first few years of school wasn't super bad or anything like that. But there was some weird occurrences, like when I smashed my toe on one of the seesaw things, and just kind of walked it off and went in for nap time. Took off my shoe to realize that my whole sock was covered in blood from where I had smashed my whole toenail off, and the teacher freaked out, and I was just like, yeah. I don't know if that had any relation to the injury or not, but little by little they started noticing different things about me that I wrote with what they called the left hand hook. I'm right-handed, and the injury was on the left side because the handlebars of the bike smashed me like right here, and it was it must have been pretty hard. But in a way, I think that was kind of a blessing because, while it did develop these learning problems and these thinking problems, these reasoning difficulties, the vast majority of the problems that it caused me were kind of motor coordination, hand-eye kind of stuff. So it was, for as severe as the injury must have been, it was, I'm pretty lucky because, at least I think that, for the most part, my reasoning and my logic is okay. And part of that is just because now I've grown old, or I've grown old-ish. I'm about to turn 43 in next year. I remember having the term developmental delay pop up when I was, I don't know, maybe around 8 or 9. And that, reflecting on what I was told then, makes a lot of sense now that I would be, or my development rather, would be a few years behind the other kids. And So now I'm 40, about 43. We'll just say I'm 43 now. And yeah, so I'm caught up a little bit better, if that makes sense. But I still, to this very day, can't hold my hand steady enough to use a soldering iron. I still drag my feet. It's stuff that I've tried to correct. Other people have, teachers, doctors, people have tried to help me correct, and it's just never worked. My handwriting is insanity. If you see my handwriting, it don't give it to what do you call those people who look at the analyze people's handwritings and all of that stuff, because they will probably assume I'm a serial killer or something like that. It's just no, it's just my function not so good. And where things really started getting the worst, at least for those first few years after the accident, was in my, again, back to my social behavior, because I didn't know how to take things. I didn't know how to communicate properly. Communication is still probably number one or two of the biggest things that I still struggle with. My communication not so good. I would say stuff and try to communicate stuff back then as much as I do now that people don't understand or people take the wrong way. That has happened more times than I can count, baby. That has happened more times than I can count, that I say one thing meaning one thing, and when other people hear it, it's the other way, if that makes sense. And I can't explain it, because back then that just seemed kind of normal to me, but just nobody could hear what I was trying to say. And I was I would get real confused about a lot of things, and not just, not like the cognitive stuff, not like what's my name or who's the president, that cognitive concussion testing or whatever you want to call it. But everything is like a blur, or almost everything. I can't say everything, because I have a lot of very sporadic memories. I remember stuff going all the way back to being in diapers. I remember like my dad's old hollow body guitar and my mom's piano and stuff, and I remember sitting at that piano. As a matter of fact, I've got a picture of that too. It's not on my switcher, but I'll try to put it like right here in the post just to show you. I can remember that, sitting in front of that piano and trying to pick up the keys. As a matter of fact, the two of these pictures that I've shown you were two of my mom's favorite pictures of me. She said that she knew I was going to be a musician or deep into the music, whatever you want to call it, right away, because I didn't sit there at the piano and bang on the keys. I would sit there and try to pick out melodies and stuff, and she said that she liked this picture just because of the grin on my face. I was fucked up. I got fucked up in that accident, and there was nobody to blame. It was a freak accident that just is what it is. And if we had have known back then what we know now, it would have helped a lot. But there's no magic pill either. can't go back to before the brain injury. And yeah, so, my memory, I remember a lot of stuff like that. And but at the same time, all of that, a lot of that in between stuff is just gone. You know, and it's certain types of things that I remember, especially when it comes to like music stuff and movies and, things like that. I remember, this might have been as early as me being in, well, no, it would have been a little bit after me being in diapers, but, I remember that sitting down and watching the Creature from the Black Lagoon for the first time with my parents. That was one of the types of horror movies that Mom didn't try to shield me from. But it was, that was what, that was what, drove me head first into horror. I was 5 years old trying to watch, Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger. I was watching them. Poppy let us watch that shit on his living room floor, basically on a loop. And that and the first, Friday the 13th Part 3 and the first Nightmare on Elm Street, me and my cousin, my twin cousin, my sister, we'd be watching it on Poppy's floor, almost every weekend. But Mom, I digress. A lot of that, the stuff in between, it's just hard to explain, but things get cloudy. And I don't always, as much as people don't tend to hear what I'm trying to say, a lot of times I don't hear what other people are trying to say either. That's another one that, has pretty much always been a bit of a struggle. And, I guess it goes back to the communication thing. So, in school for those first few years, being misunderstood meant that you were going to be bullied, and I did. I got bullied by other kids. I got bullied by adults, people that were in charge of caring for me. And you know what? I'm not even holding no grudges over that. It just is what it is. And there was a lot of trauma that happened through that time. And, I just, I didn't know how to process it. And, of course, when you're that young, you don't know how to process. I don't think you're going to know how to process that anyway, even if you've got a perfectly healthy developing brain. It's just that, I really do think that it left me wider open to things like post-traumatic stress. And, it was just so much. Plus, the trauma from being sick all the time. Again, this is completely outside of the brain injury, but, I was getting at least one pneumonia every year. And when I was 12, I had walking pneumonia, double pneumonia, and mono all at the same time. 100%, I've had somewhere around 50, I believe, pneumonias in my lifetime. I didn't stop having pneumonias until a couple years ago. After the one in 2017, my oxygen hasn't been over 95% since. But, again, I'm lucky. But I can remember, getting to, I don't know, I want to say around 8 or 9 years old, and they were starting to realize that something was wrong. And I don't the the idea of all of this, or at least the biggest part of the developing and functioning things, the idea of all of that going back to the brain injury was thought about, but not really accepted. And, we went through those few years, and we had a brain scan done finally, a CT scan, I believe at age 9 or 10. But what the doctor ultimately said was that the CT scan didn't show abnormalities, but we're talking 4 or 5 years after the accident, which means that all of the swelling and everything that the CT scans are really looking for is going to be gone. What's left over is developmental. It's, I don't really have the education or the mind to ability to really explain it in justice. Yeah. But that this was, I think that Mom just kind of didn't want to accept that, or she took it the wrong way to mean that what we were dealing with was not I think she thought that he was saying that what we're dealing with wasn't related to the brain injury. And I don't think that that's what he was saying in retrospect, of course, because I was a kid. I didn't understand anything that was going on. The thing that I did understand, that that was kind of a funny story going back, because and preface this by saying that this isn't a knock on my mom, because she was doing everything that she thought was in my best interest, even if some of the ways that she went about it might have been the wrong, counterproductive, I guess. Because like, we were sitting in the observation room, and they had the big mirror up on the wall. I'm like, I think I've seen this in a movie or something. And that's a one or a two-way mirror, whatever, one-way mirror, whatever you want to call it. But she's like, no, Timmy, that's that's just a big mirror. You're just being paranoid. I'm like, no, that's one of those mirrors. There's people on the other side sitting in the dark watching me right now. She's like, no, until the doctors and people come in from the side, and they're like, no, you're right. It is an observation mirror. We're watching you. And they took me back and, showed me the room and everything. And, the funny thing about it is, once they came out and then pulled me in there to show me the room, I was okay. I was okay with it after that. I understood a little bit better because, yeah, I've seen that in a movie. But I think that, them misinterpreting the doctor's explanations, or, I guess I should say neurologist, whatever, but I think that was the end of, or at least a very long temporary thing of just forgetting about the whole idea of the injury, because the doctor said the CT scan didn't show anything. So I remember, that it was enough that I could tell that I wasn't like the other kids. I wasn't like the other kids. Just plain and simple. I wasn't like the other kids. In the words of a great man, there are no other men like me. Just me. But, seriously, not just because, not because I'm so great. It's just, I knew I was different. Of course, I didn't know that quote back then, I know how time works, so, I'm not that deluded. But, I would literally fall, well, not fall, but purposely lay down on my floor and just bawl and cry because I didn't know what the fuck was wrong with me. All I knew is that people didn't make no goddamn sense. And I didn't make no goddamn sense to them. And, they don't seem to understand or look at things the way that I look at them. They don't, it was twisted. And that combined with all the other trauma and things that I was enduring at that time and for a long time. And, that's the thing that if we had have known then what we know now, that's where that would have helped because, we would have had a better understanding of what I was going through, what I was dealing with. But I just knew that something was different. And, and there, again, was other things I was confused about because there was a big thing of just, like, not knowing who I am, if that makes sense. I mean, I knew who I was. I just, who or what the fuck am I? I have these crazy dreams, to be fair, I had crazy dreams before the accident. I remember dreaming, I must have been around 3 years old, about an old witch in the middle of Leggett's department store, jumping out, scaring me, and then trying to trade underwear with me and shit. I had another dream around the same time where I went and tried to walk to 7-Eleven and got lost and just ended up in my backyard, but it wasn't my backyard anymore. And then they pulled out a horse and we started riding around. I don't know really how old I was when I had those dreams, obviously, but I know it was before the accident, or at least I'm pretty sure that it was before the accident. And I just, going through that, not knowing who I am, what's wrong with me, I guess, really, just at that same time, plus the added trauma of hitting puberty. Hitting puberty is a fucking bitch. A lot of us grow up and just totally forget about, how hard hitting puberty was. But I haven't forgot that shit, because, it really is. Everything changes. And, we had these backyard wrestling matches, and it created a lot of confusion where my cousins were taught how to play wrestle, how to choreograph what they're doing and, hitting each other with the soft elbows, all of that. And, we were all wrestling fans, but nobody really taught me that. And to me, wrestling was a shoot. If you're not a wrestling person, a shoot is like not in kayfabe, or, well, I guess I'm speaking wrestling speak to explain wrestling speak, but it's outside of the story or the angle that that you're doing, and sometimes it's they will use the term shoot for an interview, talking about what's going on behind the scenes outside of the story, blah blah blah. But in a match, a shoot is when the winner's not predetermined, and it's not soft elbows, or when you start talking about professional wrestling, it's a lot more dangerous and a lot more a lot soft, a lot not so soft, or but I digress. Wrestling's not fake, it's fiction, or at least most of what you see on the screen is fiction. But it's Shakespeare. It's an athletic Shakespeare, really. But nobody was teaching me that. So when I had wrestling matches in my neighborhood, they almost always ended in a fight, because we're sitting there trying to do takedowns and make each other literally submit and give up. And I never gave up in any of those matches, 100. But I'd go over to my cousin's house and we'd wrestle, and so they're out there trying to play wrestle on the side of the house, and they've got a fence going around, so it's almost like ropes and a turnbuckle and everything. And so they're out there trying to play wrestle, and I'm trying to shoot wrestle. I feel fucking bad about that now. And 100, I don't think that anybody in my family holds that against me now. But, I still feel bad about it, because, I just didn't understand. And they started trying to tell me about it, but, by this point, once again, I wasn't really hearing what other people were saying. And I want to make it clear, before we even go any further, that my story is going to be completely different. My experience is going to be completely different. My symptoms, my downfalls, my advantages, all of that stuff is going to be completely different from the next person that had a pediatric brain injury or just a brain injury, period. The brain is, hopefully you already know this, but the brain is a very complicated machine, with molecular structures and, stuff that your primitive minds wouldn't understand. I kid, I'm joking. But, the brain is a very complicated machine, obviously. And so that, the symptoms are going to be different for everybody. Like I say, I think that the most of my problems, outside of the communication and stuff is, motor skills. My motor skills are terrible. My motor skills are terrible. But again, now that I've caught up, so to speak, and I've grown up, I've grown old-ish, it's a lot easier to wrap my head around it now, but because of the nice leg you got there, little dude, I like your leg. But because I'm older now, I do understand it a little bit better. It doesn't make me handle fits of stress any better. The thing that really helps with that more than anything in the world is cannabis. 100. The cannabis helps me more than anything in the world. Because we're right about at that age. We're talking about me hitting puberty, and things started getting, really crazy. The rage fits are, the big thing, because when when I get stressed out, it really, when I get stressed out, we'll say, I get really frustrated. I get so flustered that sometimes I would just fly off the handle and break something or hurt myself. I've through up until I want to say about 96. Yeah, 96 was, I think, was my last one. I tried to commit suicide, several times. I was in and out of psychiatric hospitals, almost the entirety of my teenage years. As a matter of fact, the very first one was when I was 12. Um, but, as long as I didn't get frustrated, that wasn't such a problem. The real thing was just that I was already dealing with all of the other things going on, plus the stress of just hitting puberty again. Um, you know, Frustration builds up quick. It starts building up, and or stress starts building up, and you know, you start to worry about things, and you start to want things, and the things that you want start to change, and the impending feeling like you're never going to get to it, and you want to just hurry up and grow up. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know that that's a common thing for kids, period. But I'm just emphasizing the stress of hitting that age. But for me, having the having the stress of it build up meant that I was flying off the handle more, and I was starting to get into things that I shouldn't have gotten into. And then, I would go to school, and I had this thing where the other kids would, we talked about me getting bullied both by adults and teachers and daycare, or not daycare, but, like summer camp and after school instructors that would bully me. But the kids, it was a really weird thing that fell into a racial divide, because I'd go to school, and well, my brothers, both of my brothers, were already pretty deep into the hip hop culture, and I had already, I had heard the Run DMC, Tougher Than Leather, and that was the first one to hook me. And then the Cool Mo D's, what was it, like 1985, when he dropped the was it just the plain Cool Mo D, the one with Go See the Doctor and tell me, do you know what time it is? Check my clock. Put your Gucci watch on and synchronize the time, and let's rock. But I actually forwardgress, or progress, I guess, because we went backwards, now we're going back to where we were, and hitting around fifth, sixth grade, going up into eventually middle school. I got bullied by pretty much all the kids, or at least most of most of the boys, some of the girls, but it fell on a racial divide, because the white kids would beat me up, and then the next day they want to beat me up again, like I was an easy target. But the black kids at the school would beat me up, and the next day would ask me to go shoot basketball with them. or throw the football. You know? So, I'm going to keep this part short, but there was a little bit of confusion in my mind. And now, again, in retrospect, I attribute this to the injury, was the feeling of, okay, this is the culture that I'm meant to be. And that's not a bad thing, by any means, because I love my dudes. The 4, sometimes 5-man crew back in the Dixon days, and my dudes over at Shelburne, and once we got into Lehigh, and all of that shit. But I got it in my head that the black kids listen to hip hop and all of this stuff, and the white kids are listening to rock and country and all this stuff, and the white kids just want to beat me up and beat me up again, and the black kids are the ones actually hanging out with me after we fight the first time. And so I split the music. I felt like I couldn't be a hip hop head and R&B and reggae and stuff and not, and all at the same time, like rock and reggae or rock and country or any of that. I still don't really like country that much, but a few things. But again, it was just confusion. It was confusion. And it's actually kind of a shame, because Mom and Dad had some really great music going on around me, and I didn't appreciate it nearly as much back then as I do now. I'm talking like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Iron Butterfly, the Heart, Cream. Mom was a big Beatles and Eric Clapton chick, and Dad was all about his Rolling Stones and some Buddy Guy, B.B. King. My parents had some really great taste in music, and well, obviously Dad still does, but it came off wrong to other people, and people didn't see it the right way, and because they didn't see it the right way, I didn't see it the right way. I'll give you the examples, because the phrase that I heard more than any other, and I still hear this phrase today a lot, and 100 100, I hate it, is that white kid thinks he's black, or act your own color, that shit. They was looking at it the wrong way, and once I started getting into middle school and expanding my circle of my black friends, and I start meeting people that I hadn't met before who don't know me as well as my boys from back in Dixon, and people misunderstand me greatly, and I misunderstand myself, and a lot of it, I think, came across as appropriation, or whatever you want to call it, but to this day, my love for hip hop never changed. I just I expanded my mind once I got into high school, because that's where I just started accepting, that's why I opened my mind to the world of music and started realizing, that it wasn't about black, white. It wasn't any of that bullshit that they were telling me about acting a color. Is, life is just about you, or life is about life, you know. Pigmentations and, where our ancestors branched out in the world. I mean, I'm not going to say that it doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't separate us from our common ancestors. you know, Whether we're Neanderthal DNA people or not, we still come from the same common ancestors in Africa, what, 6 million years ago or whatever, And, you know, the band that really started changing my mind there, the first like rock band I started getting into was Nirvana. And, I became a huge Nirvana fan like immediately. But we're not quite there yet because, you know, we got to talk about my first hospitalization because, we already touched a little bit on this in a previous video, but I was on a paper route. I had just gotten a paper route, and I'm not going to say 100% for sure, what was really going on, but I was experiencing hallucinations. And I don't really know how old I was when the hallucinations started because I'd had hallucinations before this. I'd had hallucinations of David Lee Roth singing in my ear at night. I had, various other hallucinations, but nothing that was, really troubling or anything like that. It was always just like music or something. And it was usually, audio. But when I hit that paper route, maybe it was just the stress of the paper route. I was doing pretty good on that paper route, but there was stress involved, and there was a lot of other stuff that was going on at that same time, and I started seeing faces in some of the windows that were not like different people. It was the same person, and it was somebody that I knew. They blamed it on the medication that they had just put me on, Silert, and maybe it was the Silert. I don't really know, but I don't think that it was, because I'd had hallucinations before that, and I had had hallucinations after that. As a matter of fact, that's probably going to be a whole nother ramble sesh for the Stoney Shamans Corner, is my hallucination management system. But, that really began compounding things. But my overall experience with the hospital was great. I even had a friend of mine that came out to the hospital to see me with a big bag full of letters because Coach T, our phys ed coach back at Shelburne, had everybody in the class one day sit down and write me letters, like get well little notes. And so they put them all in a big bag, and here she comes up to the RMH with my mom, and we just popped down. She brought me a big old teddy bear with it too. I love you, girl. But and we just sat in the hall right there, sitting down on the floor, reading letters, reading notes from school. That was cool, and that's 100. That's a memory that I keep for my lifetime, and I've still got those letters and that teddy bear sitting in a box somewhere in my dad's storage shed right now. But where things really started taking a turn was where I wanted to be bad, and I don't know why or anything, it's just like I wanted to be bad and I wanted to smoke. I wanted to try beer, I wanted to try weed. I wanted to, you know, maybe it was just that I wanted to be one of the cool kids. I don't know. But I got it in my head regardless. And it led me both to losing my virginity and smoking weed for the first time at a very early age. I mean, I was like 13. Uh, and, things really changed after that, boy. Things really changed after that. Um, the ironic thing is that I just wanted to get high. But what we would come to find eventually, because when I started smoking weed, it was, a thing that I did once in a great while. I was more concerned with trying to get tail than I was, you know, the weed or trying to get high. But when I did it, I was doing it because I wanted to get high. And what I would end up finding eventually over the years, as I've already said, and it's pretty obvious, is that it was it's ironic because what I ended up finding eventually was that all of those rage fits, all of those angry, frustrated moments where I needed to stop, drop, take a break, and smoke a blunt, it works. It works. You can say what you want to say about the psychoactive effects, okay, it's whatever, but it's not doing any or putting me in any real jeopardy. And it's a lot safer than like 99.8, I'm guesstimating, percent of substances all over the planet. So it's people nip. It's literally people nip. So it works. But I digress, or I regress, in whatever you want to call it, because while I was, super concerned with just trying to get laid and, trying to, get some action, things weren't happening the way that I expected them to happen, and I still had those communication issues. And so I didn't, to this day, I can't approach women. I've lived my whole life waiting for a woman to approach me. There was some times when I was really, really young, or, when I approached my very first girlfriend, not the one that I really lost my virginity to, but, my first serious girlfriend was age 12, and her I did pursue. I pursued her like crazy. But I don't know, maybe it's, all the rejection and everything that I would experience over the years that made it develop that way more than the brain injury. But, it definitely eats away at my communication, and I can't control the trembles necessarily when I get nervous about something. And, the way that stuff like that comes across, even when you're, 13, 14 years old, is off-putting. And because mental illness has pretty much always been so stigmatized, things didn't go very well. And luckily for me, I grew up with a very, very strong love and respect for women, for the women around me, because, my mom, 100, and, you know, we're coming up on, I think, about 10 days from the 4 year anniversary, or at least the time of me filming this is about 10 days from the 4 year anniversary of her passing. But, my mom was everything. I wanted to stay home and hang out with mom as like a toddler, you know, more than I wanted to go play with those other kids. And my sister, we had a foster sister when I was really young too, that would, kind of try to like shield me over and protect me and everything, you know, I don't know where in the world Kim is right now, but, I hope she knows that, she means the world to me. I haven't seen her. The last time I saw her, I was probably 15 or 16 years old. So, I love you, girl. Wherever you's at in the world, I love you, baby. But because of that, I always tried to be respectful. And, there was a time or two that I was disrespectful. But my mama was there. My mama was there to straighten me out. The only time she ever put a hand on me. Because I called this girl a bitch on the phone one time. And, she showed me. But I digress, I have lashed out at people, not women, but, people in general, when I'm pushed into a corner, But that's another wave, and that don't happen very often. And thank God it doesn't now, because what the fuck would I really do about anything now? But basically, I'm going to just sum up through my teenage years because I don't really need to give you my life story. But I struggled, we'll say. And I was in and out of psychiatric hospitals, and I was, pretty much my whole teenage years. And then as soon as I hit my teenage years, or was ending my teenage years and pretty much just turned 18, I was dealing with insomnia super bad. And I mean, like, days at a time where the only drug that I did was weed. And I'd just be up for, 3 days straight until my body crashed. I tried to sleep, but I'd just toss and turn. The insomnia was super, super chronic. And, anyway, so I was walking out one night with some dudes, picked me up. I was just looking for something to do. I was bored walking around. And they was riding around shooting out windows with a slingshot. Just, I don't know. I hate to use the term boys will be boys or whatever, so I won't. But, they were just up to no good. It's not a knock against them. Young people do stupid shit, and I was definitely doing a bunch of stupid shit because, I didn't get out of the car, and I didn't shoot any of the windows out myself. 100. My word is bond. I did not shoot a single window out. Anybody that was there will tell you the same thing. The police report would have told you the same thing, but it ended up becoming my first time in jail. And then I would be in and out of jail, sometimes for bullshit like that, and then sometimes, I'd steal stuff and I got caught. As simple as that. I was being stupid, and I spent a few years just in and out of the misdemeanor block until I got my first felony. And then in 99 I got sentenced to 8 years of probation because I went into this guy's house and I stole a bass amp and I stole what was the other thing? Oh, I stole a few CDs. And, just to be clear, this wasn't to buy drugs, anything like that. And I had already tried drugs or real drugs up to this point. Well, I had tried, we had done Ritalin and a bunch of times, and I had done Coke or crank, Coke and crank really, once or twice, and I had done acid several times by this point, and but that's not what I was doing. I wanted to listen to those CDs, and I wanted to use that bass amp. But what I did was what I did, and what I did was wrong, and I deserved those 8 years of probation. What I did not deserve was the thing that would send me to prison, which was technically a probation violation, because when they sentenced me to house arrest and the 8 years of probation, they didn't bother putting an ankle monitor on me because I was living with my parents in the county by this point, and the county was too poor to afford ankle monitors. So it was real easy for me to get out at night and go wherever the fuck I wanted to go. But I did a couple times, and just to go out and walk around, and I was trying to not smoke weed. They'd been pushing at me for years at this point to give up the weed, and saying that's the cause of all your problems, that's the cause of all your problems, and blah blah blah. I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's the thing that's actually helping with my problems. And the worst of my problems, the problems that create the most damage, we'll say. But I couldn't handle the frustration at that point. I was going for all this stress, and I knew that I couldn't smoke weed or they were going to send me straight to prison, and I was miserable. I was there every night praying for fucking death, and I actually had it going through my brain, my crazy ass, injured, underdeveloped, whatever you want to call it, brain, thinking, well, maybe I'd just be better off in prison. And then I smoked some weed. And again, I hope I'm not ironically using the word ironic, but the ironic thing is that I was fine after that. I was perfectly fine after that. When I smoked weed, I felt, I was like that Infectious Groove song. I may be ugly, but I'm feeling fine. Just thought I would say, I got funny hair, but I'm feeling fine. It's only a look. I might be crazy, but I'm feeling fine. You got me the hook? So they send me to prison for a year, and it was what was it? I think it was it was a year and 4 month sentence. With 85% good time, I'd end up spending, was it like 13 months and a few days. As a matter of fact, I actually got out 3 days before my birthday. And, just sidetrack, but just to, make it clear for the millionth time that I don't hold a chip on my shoulder for going to prison over the things that I did leading me into probation and house arrest. I have a chip on my shoulder for being penalized for the one thing that was bringing me some peace and serenity. So that was an experience. We'll just leave it at that. And they had started me on, actually before I went to prison, they had started me on a medicine called Seroquel, because, you know, again, I losing myself trying to communicate this and completely forget to include, you know, all of the misdiagnoses through the years. And I mean, some of these, you know, maybe there's some truth to them, maybe not. I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I've been diagnosed bipolar. I've been diagnosed schizoaffective. I've been officially diagnosed with PTSD as well. And that one, I think, is, you know, a pretty obvious one. But, you know, again, I was never really officially diagnosed as a brain injured person. I don't know what you would call it. You know, a person with an intellectual disability, a developmental disability. But I was definitely, at least in my opinion, was definitely misdiagnosed as autistic. Well, I really even don't know that it wasn't really an official diagnosis either. I think it was something that Mom read in a doctor's report that said I displayed autistic characteristics or something to that effect. And she saw the things that I was going through, and when, you know, while she's working at WWRC, Woodrow Wilson Rehabilitation Center in Fishersville, Virginia, you know, she's also reading reports about kids who are autistic and the things that they're dealing with. And, you know, it's like, well, that sounds a lot like Timmy. And, you know, is making her own connections there. But, you know, I definitely don't see it. Again, I don't, you know, there was some issues that I was born with. I just don't think that my developmental disability, or whatever we're going to call it, my brain injury, you know, I think is responsible for, you know, the vast majority of it. Mental health, diagnosing mental health is like, it's like YouTube conspiracy or YouTube theories about Mephisto. That's kind of, you know, diagnosing mental health. It's a guessing game, is what I'm saying. It's an educated guessing game, but it's a guessing game. Don't get me wrong. Going through prison was also one of the best things to actually happen to me. It was rough. But at the same time, I was incredibly lucky. I was incredibly prepared to keep to myself, you know, and play by the unwritten rules, because I'd already gone through all of that in a much different way. But, you know, I had already gone through that basic thing of keeping to myself, not telling people things that I don't feel like they need to know, and being cautious of what people are trying to get out of me. You know, so I did fairly well. And, you know, I actually did make friends in prison. And, you know, people that I'll never forget. But, you know, I survived it pretty easily. And I learned it was, at the same time, still extremely rough. The living conditions at Powhatan, for instance, C3, C4 was a lot better once you were classified, but C3, the living conditions were just terrible. I mean, they were bad. I'm not going to rant about it right now, but, you know, they were bad. I mean, like 120 degrees every day. Probably not literally 120 degrees, but it goddamn felt like it. But it was, the roughest thing about it is honestly just being away from the people that you care about, your family, my mother. Luckily, I do have parents and a family that love me and that support me. And my mama and my daddy was there every weekend with me, during my entire 13 months and couple days. They were locked up right there with me. And I know this isn't the prison video, and we already said this in the prison video, yada, yada, yada. But if you ever do find yourself in prison, value those fucking visitations. That is the best thing that you're ever going to get if you're in prison. So value those visitations. But, coming out of prison was a very long, crazy ride. I was finally approved for disability, and under misdiagnosis, but it was obvious after being in there for 13 and a half or 13 months, couple days, that, my symptoms, or whatever you want to call it, weren't drug related. They were psychologically related. And so they went ahead and approved me. And I'm not on disability anymore. I'm on retirement now because my mom passed away, and my disability is considered an adult child disability because I was injured as a baby, well, a toddler. And so now that mom is passed, I'm actually receiving what she paid into Social Security. And I would give it straight back if it meant getting my mama back. But that's a whole nother rave and a whole nother bottle of Molly. The real bad thing is that getting out of prison, I didn't want to go back to smoking weed right away because I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back to that, I was not one of those people that comes out of prison and thinks, oh man, I ain't afraid of a little more prison time, whatever. Nah. I'm trying to stay home, I realized that what I said before going to prison about maybe being better off in prison, it was something that I ended up needing to go through, but I didn't want to go back and have to do it again. Who knows if you're going to be that lucky the second time through. But I did eventually start smoking weed again because, it was almost like I had to, not because I was addicted or whatever, because if with weed, it's impossible to be physically addicted to cannabis because it sticks to your fatty tissues so long that it gradually works itself out of your system, thereby providing its own natural detox. So you would never experience any type of physical withdrawals from cannabis alone. At least not pure cannabis is what I'm saying. So I did, and lo and behold, I ended up meeting this chick, and we were hanging out for a while, and she's a great chick too. 100. She was a great chick too. We just kind of clicked, and we ended up having some problems after a while, but I don't even remember what any of it was about, to be 100. But she was a really fucking cool chick, and I appreciate her. And I started smoking weed again, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I think my probation officer at that time was just kind of ready to look the other way. Well, actually, he was my last, would end up being my last probation officer, but it would become clear later that, he didn't have a problem with me using cannabis. as long as I wasn't causing any problems, getting into trouble, and whatever, whatever. But so I was doing this, and this was still 20 years ago under prohibition. So weed was a lot harder to find, and you know, back in those days, you were happy to have a little bit of dirt weed, some good old, brickweed. Good thing about brickweed was, you break up this tiny little piece and it end up being like 3-4 grams, Although to be fair, usually a third of that would be seeds and sticks. But I digress. But a lot of the time, you just couldn't find anything at all. So medicating daily with cannabis was an impossibility at that time. And, me and her drifted apart, and I was looking for weed one night, and just I couldn't find none anywhere, and I was miserable. I was depressed. I was freaking out over myself, and but dude had some crank, some methamphetamine, and was fuck, I didn't really want to do that shit again, but it was there, so I did it. And then I did it for, I don't know, maybe a year or something after that. Well, it was November 7th, 2002 was the last time I used. But, I got really, really strung out on that stuff. And understand this about not just somebody whose psychological problems are so closely tied to a brain injury, but just people with psychological problems in general. We don't get worse because of drugs. We turn to drugs because we're worse, if that makes sense. And, it's like we feel we need something to try to fix us. And it's true with methamphetamine and heroin and cocaine, all of that shit. Everything, almost everything except for like weed and shrooms. And acid's not really the same, but acid can be really dangerous. But with weed, with cannabis, it's a hell of a lot better than taking a pill, and all the side effects and everything that you get from taking those pills. And it helps with the problems, and at the same time is something that I enjoy the feeling of, it's people nip. Except we don't go through balls of rubber bands and rub around in the catnip. We rub around and dive into a big ball of pizza. But I did a whole nother video on the meth experience, and so I'll spare you that ramble sesh for now. Because I did get clean, and that was when I found out for sure that my probation officer was gonna let me slide, was ready to let me slide with weed. And I'm definitely grateful for that, because that was what got me finally back out of the system and to a place where I could finally begin to develop. What was it Jimmy Cliff that sang that song, many rivers to cross? Or maybe that was an old gospel song that he redid. I don't know. A great song. But it wasn't the end of my troubles or my struggles. It was the beginning, though, of my redevelopment. Everything changed. It was actually kind of prophetic of a dream that I had while I was locked up, because in the dream, and this is a very typical textbook, easy dream to explain, or, this would be something that you would teach if you were teaching somebody dream psychology, really. I mean, because it's a great example while I was locked up, and it's very basic and easy to understand. But in the dream, I was in a field running with all my friends, and then we all just started jumping and leapt up into the sky, and we just all started flying around and just flying forward until they all started disappearing, and I started realizing that I didn't know how to land. And then when I landed, I got down to the ground, and it was like several years had passed by, and none of the same people that I knew were around. Everything was different. Stores were in different places, and it was just really, really, really weird. And I didn't even really, well, I mean, I sort of made the connection when I had the dream, but I didn't really pay it a whole lot of mind because it just seems kind of obvious, that you feel like you're going to go home from being in prison after 13 months, which is really 100, which is really only 2 days. You only do 2 days, no matter how long you're locked up. But, and 13 months is definitely short time. I was definitely a short timer. I met a kid that was 19 years old getting ready to push like 120 years in Powhatan. His 2 days are the days that he goes in and the day he dies. But it's still 2 days. Anyway, I digress. But I'm getting older, and around different people now. I'm around all new people that I don't really know. I start meeting more people here in the Berg, and I eventually moved to the Berg and started hanging out at the clubhouse. And if you don't know what a clubhouse is, I don't know if other states have these or not, but it's run by the Community Services Board, which is, like state-funded mental health counseling and medication management, yada, yada, yada. So they also provide clubhouses in different regions where people with mental illnesses, disabilities can go and hang out, work around the house, and, just be part of something, and, work with other people dealing with other issues or similar issues, completely different issues and similar issues. It's supposed to be all about helping each other, and at that time it was great. At that time, by the time I left, it turned into some straight up bullshit. But that's a completely different story. That's a failure of the state and state funding more than anything. But it's led me over the past, I want to say around 10 years, a little bit, well, maybe closer to around 13 years, something, of self-discovery. And just, there's definitely been some ups and downs along those ways, but I've been smoking weed for pretty much every day for about the past 15 years or so. And in that time, I've not had a single rage fit. I've not broken anything, at least not on purpose. I've broken some stuff by accident because, that first terp slurp that I had, well, I'll show you on here, like this one right here, my trembly hands, and I just accidentally dropped it on the table. That video's still on my channel if you want to go watch it. But I digress because, but I haven't hurt myself. I haven't committed acts of self harm or been so frustrated that I fly off the handle, because if I get to that point where I feel like I'm getting overwhelmed and just ready to pop, I could take a few tokes. And buddy, I poke after that, Sometimes I'll sit down, I'll smoke, and within 20 minutes I forget what I was even fucking frustrated about. 100, 100. But maybe it's been this past year or so of isolation, but I really feel like I've been in this place these past couple years where I've been able to really just kind of go inside my head and reflect and start putting pieces together, and understanding a little bit better. And remember when we were talking about, there not being a magic pill, and knowing, if we could have known then what we know now, but if we had have known then what we know now, again, that would have helped with the confusion over, what's wrong with me? Why am I different than all the other children? Now I have the answer to that question. And if there's any silver lining, I hate to even say this because of how fucked up it is, but if there's any silver lining to the Chris Benoit tragedy, our knowledge, the knowledge that we've gained about concussions and brain injuries, is off the charts. It really is. It's off the charts. We do know now, or at least we know a lot more. We've made a lot more progress, and not just for children, but for professional athletes. And, so, I want the moral of this story just to be a little, well, when you meet kids especially, and people that just come across as a little bit different than you are, don't just cast them aside immediately, and don't, for God's sake, don't bully them, don't attack them, don't tell them to just be normal, because that is their normal. And try to listen a little more carefully, because sometimes people like us with brain injuries, we don't communicate the best, and so sometimes you might have to decipher what somebody says. So don't lose hope. But most importantly, if your child, or a child that is in your care, hits his head, just don't play it off, and don't lie to yourself. Honestly, if your child even just hits his head a little bit, really, you ought to be, I know it's in the United States at least, it's definitely cost prohibitive to get your child's head scanned like that. But in the case of an injury, you do want to know right away, because you don't want it to get worse, number one. And even if it's a situation like mine where there's no magic pill, as we say, just a little understanding goes a long way. And the good news is, now we've got hats on hats. That's some great hat on hat action right there, is it not? Thank you, Glenn. Is it that side or is it that side? I can't really see. Okay, it's this side. Thank you, Glenn. But that is the good news, is that we do know a lot more now. And, you know, again, in most situations, definitely my situation, there's still not going to be a magic pill. You know, it's just, you can manage, but you can't cure, if that makes sense. If you feel what I'm putting down, if you smell what the tummy is cooking. But, you know, we are where we are. And just take your head seriously. You know, take take children's head injuries serious. Don't downplay it. Don't no sell it, as they say. You know, check it out. Treat it like a book in that old commercial back in the 80s. You know, brain injuries. Check it out. So I think we're going to wrap it up right there. Thank you for being a part of my therapy sesh. And let's end it with a nice little dab. And let's make some purple Altima gravy, baby. That sounds pretty gravy to me. This stuff is gravy. It's all gravy, baby. G-Leaf is my gravy. Cheers. Cheers, my peoples. Cheers. Ooh, melted mama. Ooh, 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 ooh. That's pretty gravy, baby. Oh, ah. Ah. Yabbers, dabbers. So thank you all once again for hanging out and being my therapists today or whatever. You know, thank you for hearing me out. Thank you for being here. And yeah, if you like it and you want to see more, like, comment, subscribe if you want. And I'll see you in the next one, babies. I love you. Bye. I am a walking, talking, living, breathing treat dispenser. Sometimes the mind is a terrible thing. Say hi, little dude. Say hi, little dude. Hi. Hi. H-I-G-H. Hi.